So now we will be moving on to hear about the experience of persons with locked-in syndrome, insights from an ongoing study. So Yukiko, Himeno, Fernando, Vidal, Tatsuya, Mima, and Yumiko Kawaguchi. My apologies if I've messed up your names, but please, now your presentation.
Hello everyone, I'm Yukiko Himeno from Sakura International, Japan. It is my great pleasure to give a talk in this session as a representative of our research team. Today, I would like to present our study on the experience of persons with locked-in syndrome. Our research team consists of three major institutions. Sakura International is a peer support organization offering home care service for people with intractable disease such as ALS in Japan. Dr. Yumiko Kawaguchi is the present vice chairman of the organization and received her PhD degree from Ritsumeikan University in 2013. Professor Tatsuya Mima, a medical sociologist, was the vice chair in her dissertation committee. I, Yukiko Himeno, am a physiologist collaborating with them and other young researchers at Ritsumeikan University. Professor Mima and I visited Rovira y Virgili University, URV, in Tarragona, Spain in 2019, where Professor Fernando Vidal and Dr. Lina Massana work. Professor Vidal is the principal researcher for the research project Anthropology and Phenomenology of the Locked-in Syndrome. We all collaborate in the framework of this project. The aim of this study is to understand the experience of persons with locked-in syndrome, whom we call persons with LIS, to understand their happiness in a qualitative way. The uniqueness of our study is the approach taken from the academic side and the involvement of people living with this disease. We investigate the individual and social impacts of LIS as well as the needs and expectations of the persons with LIS. We study their experience on the basis of what they tell us about it, as well as their comments and statements. Learning more about persons with LIS will help us to figure out the social and cultural structure that underlies the living experience of persons with LIS and identify aspects that might have been overlooked in the care of persons with LIS to make recommendations for the professional caregivers and service providers and to raise public awareness. In February and March this year, we conducted a survey on the persons with LIS. We prepared a webpage and sent out a link to this webpage on Facebook in groups with many members who have ALS. Lina and Fernando, who conduct the research in Europe, carried out the survey using the same questionnaire in France and Spain. They prepared a short greeting video message to welcome volunteers to the survey. In the survey, the respondents used various kinds of communication tools. 72.2% used line of sight input to manipulate their computers, tablets, or smartphones, like the French DJ who created music using eye navigation technology for the closing ceremony of the Tokyo Paralympics this year. 61.1% used lip reading like John Dominic Bobby in the film The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. 55.6% used a transparent alphabet board written in Japanese, and others included means like Dr. Tembata moving his trunk to communicate. In Japan, the term LIS, locked-in syndrome, is not so familiar, especially to persons with LIS from motor neuron disease such as ALS. Indeed, a half of the respondents answered no to the question, do you think your physical condition is LIS, although they all met the clinical criteria for LIS. Then we asked what they thought about LIS having become the official medical term. A significant population, 80% of the respondents, who knew the term LIS but did not think it applied to their own physical condition expressed misgivings and criticized the term, saying, for example, it is laziness, ignorance, and arrogance on the part of healthcare professionals. I think it's inappropriate. I think being locked in means there are physical and mental problems, but what is it that is being referred to as being locked in? It is a dangerous expression that can lead to the negative misconception that all ALS patients end up with this. If the people around me can respond to something coming from my body that isn't language, I will not be locked in. These responses showed that respondents with ALS who did not think their own physical condition was this made a point of distinguishing their own condition from this on the basis of the assertion that they were not actually locked in. In their view, being locked in would not occur as long as healthcare professionals and the people around them responded properly. On March 28th this year, we held an international online workshop titled Locked in State as Everyday Life. In this workshop, we gave talks about outcomes of the survey, which will be published in the near future. Persons with this also made presentations and commented on our research. Mr. Takano prepared his PowerPoint slides with synthesized voice and manipulated his computer by his line-side input computer. He made a presentation based on his participation in the survey. He answered yes to the question, "Do you know the name Liz?" Answered no to the question, "Do you think your physical condition is Liz?" And raised the crucial question, "Am I locked in?" Mr. Onda sent a copy of his comment to us beforehand to read instead in the session, but he participated in the online session on live. The caregiver said, "Excuse me, but Mr. Onda wants to use lip reading. Shall I go ahead?" These two persons with Liz were invited speakers in the roundtable session. Mr. Okabe also prepared a manuscript beforehand to make a comment in the roundtable session to emphasize the importance of communication for persons with Liz. His caregiver read aloud on behalf of him in the discussion. In the roundtable discussion, there were three non-disabled people from academic and activists, in addition to the two Liz invited speakers. In that connection, we can make the following observations. In terms of using information and communication technology, no special consideration was necessary for the persons with Liz. On the other hand, it was necessary to secure a certain amount of time for the real-time voice remarks of persons with Liz, such as the helpless lip reading using the spoken letters or the alphabet board, line of sight input, and the switch operation. However, in situations where strict real-time performance was not required and the timetable was adequate, it was possible to proceed smoothly, and online social participation of persons with Liz seems to have been realized. Unexpectedly, inclusion of persons with Liz in the society seems to have been partially furthered as a result of avoiding 3 Cs: crowded places, close contact, and confined spaces in the era of the COVID-19 pandemic. Working from home has become commonplace, and it helps me a lot. I realize equality because I do not meet directly. For further contents of the workshop, please access our website, our YouTube content from this QR code. These are the taken-home notes from my presentation. In Japan, the negative connotation of the word locked in, partly at least due to the fact that persons with Liz can communicate, led these persons to reject or question the medical term Liz. Although the results reflect only information-rich persons with Liz who can use social network system as a communication tool on a daily basis, the results suggest that persons with Liz would be truly locked in only if they were totally unable to communicate. Therefore, it may be beneficial to offer devices as public support to facilitate communication between persons with LIS, their caregivers, and the larger social environment. This is a short movie of Ms. Misao Hashimoto having communication through her specialized caregiver. If you're a person with LIS and interested in sharing your experience with us for the realization of an inclusive society, please join us. If you're a researcher or healthcare professional and interested in our quest to better understand the experience of persons with LIS and the conditions for a happy life, please join us. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We appreciate it. So we're looking for questions from the audience to be able to answer. And for one of them that we have is, for people who don't like the words locked in, do you have a suggestion of a word that or a description that might fit better? Because that seems to be a significant consideration.
Oh, yes, we had a question asking them what kind of description are suitable for them, but actually there are various words they used, and some people like from a cerebrovascular origin, they admit that they're locked in, but from ALS patients, their condition of locked in progress slowly, so they do not recognize that they're locked in because they can still keep possibility to keep communication with others using various kinds of tools. So I don't remember exact expression in the questionnaire, but we're going to big publication about that. So please look forward to it. Sorry.
Thank you, Yukiko. And Fernando, we'll go to you next, but I would also like to invite Yumiko and Tatsuya to please join us as well. So you could turn on your video so that we can see you as well. Fernando.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you and thanks for this opportunity to be here wherever we are. It's great. I just wanted to underline what Yukiko explained, but also add something. On the one hand, there is a big difference in attitudes towards the term between the group of people who have entered the locked-in state, which is the way it's sometimes called, the locked-in state, as suddenly as a result of a cerebrovascular accident, and the people who have entered into that state gradually due to mainly ALS. So here is something that really shows how fundamentally different the experiences, the illness experiences of these two groups are. So we didn't try to suggest alternatives, but it is important to understand that locked-in syndrome is not the name of an illness. It really is a syndrome. It really is a syndrome that it just describes a state. That's why some neuroscientists, neuropsychologists, it might be better to speak of locked-in state as to be more descriptive. And the idea of the locked-in has a lot to do with the possibility of movement and the possibility of communication. And it's very striking that the people who have who have lost the capacity to communicate gradually, also to articulate words gradually, they are the ones who refuse the description, because they were not, whereas the people who entered into it suddenly really were sort of locked in, according to the metaphor. Suddenly, that was their existential feeling, which does not correspond to that of the people who enter the state gradually. This is a very, very important in order to understand the experience of the two groups, and also to, I would say, to handle the people who are affected with this syndrome.
That would seem to make sense, just judging from some of the community members that I know, that because it may have happened over even beyond a decade, and able to communicate, able to still be quite functioning in terms of writing books and different things, but because they've had that adaptation over time, it has enabled them to have that. So completely understandable. Yumiko or Tatsuya, would you like to add something as well?
Yeah, hello everybody. This is Yumiko. I write a message in the message run, and so I'm very happy to have an International Alliance meeting just like this way. And I hope to see you next year. We collaborated with international researchers such as Fernando, and the country's researchers. So I'd like to ask more patient associations to join us, and more countries to participate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tatsuya?
Yes, I have some comment on the Fernando's view, that I think that locked-in syndrome or locked-in state can be viewed as a kind of that not actually a state. State, I mean, in a very static way, but it can be understood as a kind of trajectory from some state to the other state. In the chronic diseases like ALS, it can be a gradually worsening, a kind of worsening to the locked-in state. But in stroke and other cerebrovascular diseases, it can be a kind of the change in the status, very abrupt changes. So it's a two kind of trajectory. So I think it's something in the spectrum, from the very abrupt change to the gradual one. That's one point. And I think that and another thing I would like to say, that I totally agree with that Yumiko, that if we have the collaboration with other diseases, other patient groups, not only the motor neuron disease, but also other kind of neurodegenerative or neurovascular diseases, it can be a very strong power for that, how to say, a kind of political power, because we have many alliances to the other people or other patient organizations. So it can be a very good one step forward if we can have the collaboration with the other patient group with similar situation, like locked-in syndrome or very severe motor paralysis or something like that. That's what I thought about this presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, yes, Fernando.
Yeah, just again to come back to Tatsuya's point, but also to touch on something that is in the question and answer. Hilmi Uysal notes that we expect vertical eye movements to be preserving classical locked-in syndrome, and eye movements can be affected very, very late in ALS. So wouldn't it be better not to define the ALS communication problem as locked in? And this is together with Tatsuya's observations, this is an important remark, because it shows that indeed this locked in is really a spectrum. It's really a spectrum, and it is also a spectrum which people who enter the state due to a cerebrovascular accident can actually move toward the better end of the spectrum in the sense that they can recover some movement, and that allows them to use a computer in order to communicate, and that supplements the vertical eye movements or the blinking as a means to communicate it. Rarely they go beyond that, but that is already a huge change in terms of quality of life, in terms of integration into society, in terms of just possibilities of living in society. So yeah, locked in is a very radical kind of terminology, a very kind of radical metaphor that also evokes something that I think all of the people affected with these syndromes more or less, well, not all of them reject, but many do, which is the idea that they are minds locked in a body. You know, this is not exactly the way they feel, although of course, you know, their minds allow them, as in Jean-Dominique Bauby's memoir, you know, to be the butterfly that escapes the diving bell. But it's a very radical metaphor that maybe does not exactly represent the kind of experience of the connection between mind and body that, you know, that is that of the affected people.
Thank you very much. And I think some aspect of it then goes to how people accept or define their abilities and disabilities, and that's part of it. And to Alper's comment that's also in the chat, which is then how do we consider the FTD element, the cognitive involvement of 50% of the people with ALS. So sounds like there's a lot more to explore and an opportunity to even consider how we look at it beyond this group and expand it to the Alliance. So thank you very much for your very informative talk this morning. We appreciate it from each of you. And now we are going to be moving on. So thank you.